She was rejected because she was poor. 5 years later, she bought the company that fired her. 5 years ago, a young woman walked into a powerful American company looking for a job. She wore a borrowed blazer. Her shoes were old. And her bank account had barely enough money to survive the month. The company's CEO looked at her resume. Then he looked at her clothes. Then he asked one question that would change her life. How much do you make? When she told him, he rejected her. Not because she wasn't qualified. Not because she wasn't intelligent. But because, in his eyes, she was too poor. He thought she didn't belong in his company. 5 years later, that same woman walked into the company's boardroom again. But this time, she wasn't there to ask for a job. She was there to sign the papers that made her the new owner of the company. And when the CEO recognized her, he couldn't say a word. This is the story of Amara Carter. A woman who turned rejection into determination, poverty into power, and humiliation into redemption. Amara Carter grew up in a modest apartment in Chicago. Her mother worked as a home health aide. They didn't have much. There were no luxury vacations. No expensive cars. No wealthy relatives who could open doors for them. But Amara had something her mother considered priceless. Ambition. From a young age, Amara understood that education was her way out. She studied hard. She graduated from college with excellent grades. And when graduation day came, she made a promise to her mother. Mom, one day I'm going to give you a life where you don't have to worry about money. Her mother smiled. I don't need a rich life, sweetheart. Amara shook her head. You've worked too hard. You deserve more. After graduation, Amara started applying for jobs. But finding a good position wasn't easy. Companies rejected her. Some never responded. Others told her they had chosen candidates with more experience. Then one morning, she found a job posting that caught her attention. Hartwell Technologies. One of Chicago's most successful technology companies. The position was junior business analyst. The salary was almost 3 times what she was currently making. Amara stared at the screen. Her heart began racing. This could change everything. She applied. And somehow, she got an interview. The night before the interview, Amara stood in front of her bedroom mirror. Her closet contained very little. She couldn't afford a designer suit. So she called her best friend. Can I borrow your blazer? Her friend laughed. For an interview? Yes. Of course. The next morning, Amara put it on. The sleeves were slightly too long. Her shoes were old. But she looked professional enough. She took 2 buses across Chicago to Hartwell Technologies. When she entered the building, she froze. The lobby was enormous. Marble floors. Glass walls. Expensive artwork. Employees dressed like they belonged in magazines. Amara looked down at her shoes. For a few seconds, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Then she whispered to herself. Don't be afraid. She walked toward the receptionist. I'm here for an interview. Minutes later, she entered the boardroom. 3 executives were waiting. At the center was Richard Hartwell, the CEO. He had built Hartwell Technologies from a small startup into a major corporation. Richard looked at Amara's resume. His eyebrows rose. Excellent academic record. Thank you. You graduated with honors. Yes. Very impressive. For the first few minutes, everything seemed perfect. Then Richard asked, where do you currently work? At a small logistics company. How much do you earn? Amara hesitated. Then she answered. $38,000 a year. Richard's expression changed. And where do you live? With my mother. Do you own a home? No. Do you rent? Yes. Richard looked at her clothes. Then her shoes. Then her resume. Finally, he leaned back. Competence isn't everything. Amara frowned. What do you mean? At Hartwell, our employees represent the company. He paused. Our clients expect a certain level of presentation. Amara immediately understood. He wasn't talking about her skills. He was talking about her poverty. She swallowed her disappointment. Sir, I may not have much, but I'm willing to work harder than anyone. Richard smiled. We'll contact you. Amara walked out believing she still had a chance. 2 days later, her phone buzzed. She opened the email. Application unsuccessful. Her heart sank. She stared at those words for a long time. Then she whispered, maybe I'm not good enough. She cried that night. But she didn't know something yet. That rejection would become the greatest turning point of her life. 3 months later, Amara found a job at a small financial services company called Novabridge. The office was nothing like Hartwell. No marble floors. No luxury furniture. No glamorous executives. Just a small office filled with hardworking people. The salary was modest. But Amara didn't complain. She saw an opportunity. She arrived early. She stayed late. And she asked questions. Lots of questions. One afternoon, while reviewing company records, she noticed something. Novabridge was losing thousands of dollars every month because of an inefficient purchasing system. Nobody had asked her to investigate it. She simply noticed the problem. So she spent 3 nights analyzing the numbers. Then she created a detailed report. The next morning, she placed it on the desk of Daniel Brooks, the company's founder. Daniel read it. Then looked at her. You did this? Yes. Who asked you to? Nobody. Then why did you do it? Amara smiled. Because I noticed the problem. Daniel stared at her for a moment. Then he smiled. You know something. What? You're working for a salary when you should be working for skills. Those words changed everything. Amara took Daniel's advice seriously. She stopped focusing only on earning more money. She focused on becoming more valuable. She studied finance. She learned business strategy. She learned investment. She learned technology. She studied how companies were valued. She learned negotiation. She studied leadership. And every night, while other people were relaxing, Amara was learning. She saved money. She invested. She attended business events. She built relationships. She made mistakes. And she learned from every one of them. Within 2 years, Amara had become one of Novabridge's most valuable employees. Daniel promoted her repeatedly. Eventually, she became a senior partner. But Amara never forgot where she started. She still remembered the borrowed blazer, the old shoes, and that rejection email. She kept a printed copy in her desk. Not because she hated Richard Hartwell, but because it reminded her of how far she had come. Meanwhile, Hartwell Technologies was becoming one of the biggest technology companies in the region. Richard Hartwell became famous. He appeared on business television. He attended major conferences. People called him a visionary. But behind the scenes, the company was beginning to struggle. A new competitor entered the market. Several major clients left. Revenue dropped. Debt increased. The board became nervous. Richard tried everything. He cut expenses. He fired employees. He hired consultants. But the problems kept growing. Eventually, the banks demanded repayment. Hartwell Technologies needed hundreds of millions of dollars to survive. Without new investment, the company could collapse. Richard sat alone in his office one night. For the first time in decades, he was afraid. One morning, Daniel Brooks walked into Amara's office. He placed a thick financial report on her desk. We have an opportunity. Amara looked up. What opportunity? Daniel pointed at the fire. Hartwell Technologies. Amara stopped breathing for a moment. She opened the report. There it was. The same company. The same building. The same CEO. The same company that had told her she wasn't good enough. Daniel noticed her expression. You know them? Amara nodded. They rejected me 5 years ago. Daniel looked surprised. Why? Amara smiled. Because I was poor. Daniel leaned back. Then he asked, do you still want them? Amara looked at the financial numbers. The company was struggling. But it still had valuable assets. Technology. Customers. Employees. Brand recognition. It didn't need to disappear. It needed new leadership. Amara slowly closed the file. How much would it cost to buy them? Daniel stared at her. You're serious? Amara looked him directly in the eyes. Very. The negotiations lasted months. At first, Hartwell's board refused. Richard believed he could save the company himself. But the situation kept getting worse. Banks demanded their money. Employees resigned. Suppliers stopped extending credit. Eventually, Richard had no choice. NovaBridge made an offer. The board accepted. The acquisition was finalized. 5 years after Amara had been rejected, she became the owner of Hartwell Technologies. The same woman who once walked through those doors hoping for a job now owned the company. The acquisition meeting took place inside the same boardroom where Amara had once been interviewed. Richard Hartwell stood when she entered. Miss Carter. Amara nodded. Mr. Hartwell. He looked at her carefully. Something about her face seemed familiar. Then suddenly, his eyes widened. You? Amara smiled. Yes. Richard slowly sat down. I remember you. I remember you too. Richard looked embarrassed. I made a terrible mistake. Amara remained silent. You were qualified, he continued. You were intelligent. I judged you because of your background. Amara nodded. You did. Richard looked down. I've regretted it for years. Amara could have destroyed him. She had the power now. She could have reminded everyone how he had looked at her clothes. How he had questioned her income. How he had decided she didn't belong. But instead, Amara said something Richard never expected. I forgive you. Richard looked up. Why? Amara smiled. Because if you hadn't rejected me. She paused. I might never have become the woman sitting across from you today. Richard's eyes filled with tears. Amara became the new CEO. But she didn't turn the company into a place of revenge. She turned it into a place of opportunity. She introduced merit-based hiring. She created mentorship programs. She opened internships for students from disadvantaged communities. She created scholarships. And she changed the company's culture. From that day forward, nobody would be judged by their clothes. Nobody would be judged by their neighborhood. Nobody would be judged by their bank account. People would be judged by their character, their skills, their work ethic, and their potential. One afternoon, Richard came to Amara's office. I don't understand, he said. What? Why are you letting me stay? Amara looked at him. Because everyone deserves a chance to become better than their worst mistake. Richard lowered his head. What do you want from me? Amara smiled. Help me make sure this company never becomes the company that rejected someone because they were poor. Richard nodded. I will. 1 year later, Hartwell Technologies was thriving. The company was profitable again. Employees were happier. New jobs had been created. and Amara stood before hundreds of employees at the company's annual meeting. She looked across the room. Then she began speaking. 5 years ago, I walked into this building looking for a job. The room became silent. I didn't have expensive clothes. I didn't have powerful connections. I didn't have money. She paused. But I had something they couldn't see. Potential. The audience listened carefully. Someone once looked at me and saw poverty. But I looked at myself and saw possibility. She smiled. Never let someone else's opinion become your identity. Never allow rejection to convince you that you're worthless. Sometimes the door that closes in your face is simply redirecting you toward a much bigger door. The employee stood and applauded. Amara looked toward the front row. Her mother was sitting there. Tears streamed down her face. Amara smiled at her. That moment meant more than any business deal. Because her mother had seen the struggle. She had seen the tears. She had seen the nights when Amara wondered if her dreams were impossible. And now, she was watching her daughter lead a company. That evening, Amara returned to her office. She opened an old drawer. Inside was the rejection letter. She picked it up, read it, and smiled. 5 years ago, those words had broken her heart. Now, they reminded her of her strength. She folded the letter and placed it back. Then she looked through the window at the Chicago skyline. 5 years earlier, she had walked into Hartwell Technologies hoping to get a job. 5 years later, she owned the company. But owning Hartwell wasn't her greatest victory. Her greatest victory was becoming successful without becoming cruel. Becoming powerful without becoming arrogant. Becoming wealthy without forgetting where she came from. And when she finally had the power to punish the person who rejected her, she chose forgiveness. She chose redemption. She chose to give others the opportunity she once desperately needed. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destroying the people who underestimated you. It's becoming everything they failed to recognize. And sometimes, the person someone rejects today could become the very person they desperately need tomorrow. The end.